Hi, I'm Theo. Welcome to my first FAQ answer session. I started building fursuits in 2002 and I like to try new techniques and materials. In 2014 I bought my first 3D printer and started to make models for fursuits, puppets, movable eyelids, animatronics. As I started to show my creations, I got a lot of questions. I wrote several tutorials to answer those. Links are in the description below. Lately, many people requested video tutorials. Well, I guess let's try it. Let's start with the questions. So, first question is 3D printing better than other fursuit building methods? Well, 3D printing for the construction of a single fursuit head is not faster, cheaper or simpler than any other construction method. And if you want to make many items, it can be worth the costs. A big advantage of 3D printing is that you can recreate something that you made before exactly like it is. So, for example, if something on this fursuit head here would break, I can just print it again. With manual construction techniques, getting a perfect copy is not that easy. And it makes it also easier to try new things without having to worry about breaking something that cannot be replaced. It makes repairs very simple. I bought the 3D printer to have more spare time. The printer can do the work while I do something else. So far that worked very well for me. Is 3D printing cheap? No. If you are on a very tight budget, there are lots of other methods that are cheaper. Basically, what 3D printing is, you trade money for time. How much does a 3D printed head cost? Well, what's not that easy to answer. It depends on what materials are used, what 3D printer is used, what quality the print is. So let's make a little estimation here. Let's say you have your own 3D printer. That means you have to buy it, and that can be quite costly. If you go for one of the very cheap models, 200 euro printer from China, which is okay to print a fursuit head, by the way. Well, you have the cost for a printer. When you need to power the printer, that's, well, a couple of 100 watts every hour, and those complicated 3D prints often take several days to print. Well, that's, even with today's electricity costs, it's not that much. Just adding another 5-6 euro to the bill. Then you have materials. You can go totally cheap, like PLA here. I found PLA for 16 euro per kilo. That's, by the way, that PLA here, directly from China. Not the best material I ever got. It did have a little bit of stringing that I normally don't have with more expensive brands, but it's still okay for a fursuit head. Well, nobody will see the inside. This fursuit head here, well, part of a head base, is made of Tolman nylon 230. That is a very, very tough nylon. I mean, you will not be able to break it. But 500 grams are about 40-50 euro. So you're looking here in material alone, 25 euro, something like that, yeah. Not that cheap, and nylon is also very hard to print. That means you cannot be totally certain that your print will work on the first time, and that means you will have wasted material. So it can get very expensive very fast if you print everything in nylon. That's why I always try my designs in PLA first. This is basically the same model, well, this one is a little bit extended. I think the price range for 3D printed head bases is between 20 and 200 euro, depending on the material, quality and also features. There are some more expensive ones that I've seen that are worth it, but these are usually made by commercial companies and charge way more because their machines are very expensive. They have to pay maintenance, they have to pay people to clean the print, do sanding and so on. So if you just want a, well, pretty standard head base, price ranges in the 100 to 150 euro area is usually normal. How do you assemble the 3D printed parts? Well, I basically use two methods. Either I use cable ties to hold them together. These holes make it very easy to do that. Or I glue them together using Plaast. Plaast is a plastic that melts at 62 degrees Celsius. So you can basically sculpt it like clay until it gets cold again, and then it is hard plastic. Plaast is exceptionally hard to break. Here I've got a piece of Plaast and I can do a lot of things to it till I get it. It's not easy to break it, and it's certainly strong enough for anything inside a fursuit head. It only has the downside of the low melting point. It's not something that you can leave in a car when the sun is shining. How do I make the lower jaw move? Okay, so I print the lower jaw as a separate piece, and my 3D models have holes in them that align the center of rotation. What I do here is I use Plaast, stick it in, and then sculpt this little knob on both sides. I then wait a little bit till Plaast is almost cool again, but it's still a little bit flexible. And then I push it in and make sure that it moves alright here. And if it's too loose, I can just use a piece of metal, stick it in here to make it wider, and it will be a perfect fit in the end. You cannot really hear it, so it's very, very smooth. Why do you make all these holes in your 3D models? Well, I've tried 3D printing without those first, and I've got three reasons for the holes. First is ventilation. You want to get hot air out of your fursuit head, and plastic is not really a good heat conductor, so the holes make it easier to get heat at least to the backing of the fur. Will your 3D model fit me? Well, it depends on how big your head is. My head is really small, so most people did rescale my head bases before we printed them to about 120%. I tried to adjust that in the last models that I released. What I usually do is I take two measurements. How wide is your head and how high is it? So that's something that you can try before you print it. Load, for example, the 3D model in Mesh Mixer and then measure from here to here to see if your head is higher than the space inside the 3D model is. Or measure from here to here to find out if it's the correct width. Can you wear glasses inside a fursuit head? Well, yes, you can. why do you wear that headband or bandana thing? Oh, yeah. Normally when I print a Fursuit head base, I deburr all the edges here in case the printer did leave some little plastic pieces. So with these heads here, I don't do that because I'm not planning on finishing them just now. That means there could be a little bit of plastic that's very uncomfortable if you have it on your skin, so that's just precaution. How heavy is a 3D printed fursuit head base? Well, it depends on the material and whether you print it solid or just with a percentage of infill. I normally print my fursuit heads with 3 layers on the outside and about 10 to 15% of infill, and that comes to about 180 to 280 grams. For a smaller head like this is more designed for use your own eyes, it can go down to about 90 grams, but that's the absolute minimum. What 3D printer should I buy? Well, if you want to get into printing fursuit head bases, you need a lot of space, because most people need a head that's at least, I would estimate, 25 to 28 centimeters wide, and if you want to print that in not too many pieces, you have to have the width and also the height. A printer with a build plate about 300 by 300 millimeters is usually ideal for fursuit use. I guess I would buy a CR10. Where can I get the files? Well, most of my models are on Thingiverse. You can just search for Tio and you'll find them. Also, link is in the description below. Can you make insert species here? Probably. Do I want to? Who knows? You can always ask, and well, if I'm interested, I do it. It's simple as that. My biggest limitations is my spare time, so if I do not have any spare time at the moment, sorry. Can you make insert future lawsuit here? No. Don't ask for Disney stuff. Really, no. How can I cut the 3D model into smaller parts? Well, I usually use NetFab Basic for that, so the free version of NetFab. How can I attach fur to the head? Well, there's several possibilities. First of all, I don't really like gluing fur to the head because it's permanent and not really easy to replace, easy to clean. I prefer to have the fur removable, so I can just get it off the head and into a washing machine. For that I usually use sew-on snaps. So one side of the snap is just sewed to the back of the fur, and the other one is inserted, for example, in one of these holes. I usually pick the holes that are in a position where they can pull the fur tight to the head, and I often also use the nose as an extra hook, so that the nose secures the fur in place. How do you make the teeth? Well, the teeth are also hand sculpted with Plaast. So here, for example, I made the teeth and tongue out of Plaast. I just added a little bit color to the tongue, but just pigments. Acrylic paint works very well with Plaast. I'm not good at molding my own teeth, Do you have a 3D model? Yes, I've made a 3D model. That one is available in Thingiverse. Keep in mind it's a model for teeth. It's not a jaw set. That means you have to cut it and glue the teeth to where they belong. And you have to align them so they can close. I didn't want to make a jaw set because the jaw set is very limited. It's just designed to fit one head. If you have individual teeth, you can place them where you need them, and you can have many different styles of upper and lower jaws. Can you add a fan inside the muzzle? Yes, you can, and some of my hats have a feature to make it easier to do it, like this one here. This is designed to fit a radial fan sitting here above, so it can suck fresh air in and then blow it inside the head. You should make sure that the airstream that comes out here does not directly go into your eyes. That can lead to dry eyes and eye infections and stuff like that. So I make sure that the air hits about here, and that works fine with me. How do you sculpt the head? Well, I've got several very different methods for making 3D models. When I want to work fast, I usually use a program like Sculpt. That's also linked in my tutorial. That program works very much like working with clay. So you can add material, you can subtract material, and you just do it with several brushes with a mouse, and can rotate your model in all directions and have a feature that makes sure that everything you change is symmetric on the other half. So it's very easy to work with it. I have showed it to several friends, and well, the results were astonishing. If you give sculptures to an artist, you can get from one day, I don't know anything about 3D modeling, to, oh, by the way, yesterday I made a horse. Really happened. Can I add foam to the outside of a head base? Yes, you can. It's actually very easy to do, and if you don't want to glue the foam on, you can use the holes to secure it. For example, the lycra material that you pull over the foam to hold it down. There are a few things you should know. First of all, if you use foam, there are basically two types of foam that are very common. First of all, this type of foam, well, mattress foam, you can get it very easy, and it basically works. A lot of fursuit builders did make the fursuit out of this material, but the downside is some of these materials are not closed cell foam. That means they can absorb moisture, and that also means bacteria can grow inside and it can rot. Not very pretty. So I usually don't like using that anymore. When you have closed cell foam does not absorb any moisture, so you can stick it in water, get it out, and it will just be wet on the outside, but once you clean that, it is dry. And that's what I usually use inside the head, for example here, for this little padding in the middle of the head. Downside of this type of foam is it does not let heat pass. So if you have a huge chunk of foam over your head, that's also something that traps the heat inside your head. Don't use more padding when you really need to. If you're going to the outside of the head and you just want to have, well, more cuddly feeling on the outside and not a hard head, I would recommend something like this. That's filter foam. So it's normally sold as a filter for aquariums. You can get it in a lot of different sizes, thicknesses, shapes. It's also a material that you can use for fursuit eyes if you're interested. So, downside to this material is it's a little bit like sandpaper. You don't want this directly on your skin. So I wouldn't recommend it for usage as padding inside, at least not without something around it to make it smoother, like you can sew it in lycra. Can I sell prints of your models? No. Can you make a fursuit head base for an animatronic character? Yes, you can. I've done it before. For example, this fursuit head base here has movable eyelids that are incorporated in the design, so all the attachment points that are needed for the eyelids are already in the 3D mesh itself. I could, for example, add movable ears to it. I just need to stiffen this part of the ear and then pull on it. Very easy to do. With a servo motor there is enough space around here, for example, or I could use a Bowden cable and pull manually, which is my preferred method. How much time does it take to make a 3D model? Well, it depends on the model itself. Normally I do not start from scratch. I use one of the models that I already have. To be more precise, I keep models in different stages. The first stage that I model is always just the outside. The outside of my 3D models are usually defined by a spline-based modeling technique. That means I do not have to adjust thousands of points to make the surface. It's just a few dozens, and that makes it very easy to change one character into the other. So, for example, these two heads here are actually derived from the same model. Okay, this concludes my first FAQ session. I hope you learned something, and if you have more questions for me, just comment on this video or reach me on Twitter. Bye!